Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and this is a new dual format kind of series that I've started, where I answer questions that I've been pitched over on Quora. There are links in the description that will lead you to Quora where you can pitch me a question and at least guarantee that I'll see it, and hopefully get around to making a response video to it. And as far as dual format is concerned, that means basically both long form content like I'm most well known for, but also short form content that I can splice up into smaller minute long sections that I can post here on YouTube as a YouTube short, as well as on Instagram and on TikTok. Hopefully driving all traffic back here to YouTube where people can enjoy my long form content. So if you have a question that you want to ask Installation 00 about anything Halo related or more or less anything else, follow the link below and I'll get round to it. In the meantime, let's kick this new series off with 20 questions asked on Quora so far. Would a UNSC longsword from Halo be able to split the throttles? If so, how would it affect the aircraft? Yes, quite simply. The maneuver would be necessary and likely controlled entirely via automation when flying in vacuum to aid in handling in 0G, while also being used to aid in high G maneuvers in atmosphere due to the immense delta wing configuration of the craft's fuselage. While the longsword does have a vertical stabilizer with rudders to help in changing the yaw and the attitude of the aircraft, at certain attitudes the delta wing shape of the longsword's wings would actually reduce or block airflow to the vertical stabilizer, so being able to throttle one engine up and one engine down to aid in the yaw of the aircraft would be essential. While most video games fail relatively quickly due to immense competition, what is it about Halo that makes it the consistently popular, unmovable juggernaut in the video game world people just can't stop playing? I can't speak to other people's experiences or to the specifics or generalities of this particular subject, but for me it's the rich and immensely deep and broad story narrative, and the connections to the characters that keep me coming back to the franchise, release after release. I have a vested interest now in the characters and where their stories will take them, and for that I will continue to consume the content and follow their stories for as long as they should last. Is there a way to bring back the Hayabusa armor in future Halo games? I'm sure it would make an immense level of sense to bring back the Hayabusa armor in Halo Infinite as a new armor variant for the Yori core. I don't understand why it hasn't happened yet, because people would go nuts for it. But we do still have plenty of time for Halo Infinite's shelf life, so it's likely that Halo Infinite will continue to exist for many years into the future yet. It's entirely possible it could come out at any point between now and then. But perhaps soon? Is there a reason for the Halo 1 assault rifle's inaccuracy? In the lore, it's actually very accurate. It's an assault rifle that fires 7.62 by 51mm full metal jacket rounds. It's a bullpup rifle, which means it loads at the stock and allows the barrel to be significantly longer but still be relatively compact and easy to move, and of course the longer barrel leads to more turns down the rifling of the barrel, aiding in projectile accuracy. But this is, after all, for lore purposes. In the gameplay, it has a significant bullet spread and accuracy massively reduced at range due to gameplay and sandbox balancing reasons. If the assault rifle could effortlessly destroy any target from short, medium and long range, there'd be no reason to pick up a shotgun or a sniper rifle. But alas, with that in mind, I have no excuse for the Halo CE pistol. Are there Spartans in the Banished ranks? Quite possibly. The Spartan 3's of Ferret team did align for a while with the Keepers of the One Freedom, a small Jiralhane-led faction that had alliances with the Banished, and Aatrox doesn't seem to necessarily discriminate against humans as being potential members of his faction. On top of this, it is not unheard of for Spartan 4s particularly to demonstrate insurrectionist sympathies and thus wish to go rogue and rebel against the UNSC. So yes, there may well be Spartans who are within the Banished. In Halo, what are some of the advantages the UNSC has over the Covenant? Well, humans understand our own technology and are highly innovative, able to develop our technology significantly over time, whereby the Covenant inherited much of their technology from foreigner artifacts, which they ill understood and thus don't know how to innovate it beyond simple adaptations to merge it with their existing technologies. Cortana has even commented on several occasions how the Covenant's use of their own slip space drives and shipborne weapons are immensely inefficient. Humans also learn from our mistakes and adapt much better than the Covenant, meaning we can seldom be exploited the same way twice. On top of this, we also have the inherent ability to interface with foreigner devices more fully than the Covenant species, giving us the ability to rapidly reverse engineer the technology to advance our own. In Halo lore, how effective are the UNSC forces against the Covenant? Is it clearly stated in the lore? I hear some people say it is a one-sided slaughter, and others say UNSC were able to inflict heavy Covenant casualties. Well, the UNSC on the whole against the Covenant, particularly in the early years of the war, it was an absolutely one-sided slaughter. Fleet battles would only have a relatively even chance of winning if the UNSC ships outnumbered the Covenant ships 3-1. On the ground, the Covenant had the numbers and the weapons and the technological superiority to utterly dominate. Later in the war, after humanity had spent a decade or two advancing our technology and reverse engineering Covenant tech and learning the Covenant's modus operandi, this made things a little more even. The Covenant still dominated on practically all fields of battle, but humanity put up a much tougher fight. It's when the Spartans are involved that things change. Once Spartans are on the battlefield, the odds tip in the UNSC's favour heavily. Spartans can tear through hordes of Covenant like tissue paper and use their weapons against them. They can move with speed and power unlike any other soldier on the battlefield, and can more or less fight without the need for rest. The problem, however, comes back down to numbers. Once the Covenant have taken huge losses, they simply extract to orbit and bombard the planet with their superior ships, rendering the threat of the Spartans practically moot, unless, of course, they make it into orbit and infiltrate those ships. The problem here being there just wasn't enough of the Spartans during the height of the war to do this. In Halo, I see plenty of dead Marines, but little to no dead Covenant. Is there a lore explanation for this? Yes, the Covenant on the whole are more resilient and have technological superiority, outnumber and outgun the human forces. This translates to meaning more humans died in engagements than members of the Covenant, except where Spartans were involved. Why doesn't the Master Chief talk in any of the Halo games? Well, he's spoken significantly more recently than he has in previous games, but I understand what you're saying. From a lore standpoint, he has a stoic personality and doesn't really relate much to others around him whom are not Spartans. Spartans do exhibit problems with socialization because they were raised in the military doctrine and taught to fight and kill. Social interaction, playing, and interpersonal skills were just not high on the agenda for the Spartans. So Chief remains very reserved and only speaks when he feels that it's absolutely necessary. From a gameplay standpoint, however, the less he says, the easier it is for the player to adopt the armor and believe themselves to be the Master Chief. The less he says, the fact that he doesn't show his face, enables the player to occupy the suit and to feel as though they are the Master Chief and the actions that are being performed are theirs, not his, which ultimately aided in the popularity of the game. Are there any companies that make Halo costumes or cosplay that are sized to fit you after giving them your height and measurements? And can the cosplay outfits they make be based off of your own in-game Spartan? Is there any company out there like that? Not any large companies, no. The issue falls to copyright infringement. Halo is a copyrighted IP. Unless there are licensing agreements in place between Microsoft and the company for the sakes of entire cosplay outfits with revenue sharing in place, which there isn't, no company would be allowed to create full cosplay suits from Halo without Microsoft's say-so, and any company found to be doing that will be promptly issued a cease and desist order and/or chased with legal action thereafter. With individuals, however, it's more of a grey area. Individuals can make their own suits with no real issues, and if the individual is careful to not directly rip in-game assets and models and construct props and cosplay elements themselves from scratch, Microsoft will often allow those individuals to sell or trade their works as more of a product inspired by Halo, rather than directly taken from it. However, Microsoft still reserves the right at any point to issue an individual with a cease and desist order and chase legal action if they deem it necessary. It's a very delicate balancing act, which is why it isn't immensely common. Is the Harbinger a precursor? Given the information, does this make sense? Well, this is actually a point of frustration for me, because Halo Infinite gave us the new faction that the Harbinger harkens from, the Zalanin, the Endless, and yet, really, we know nothing about them. In truth, we don't even know for certain that the Harbinger is actually a member of the Zalanin, so we can't even say for certain that the Zalanin look like the Harbinger, or vice versa. There just isn't the lore on it, so with that in mind, it really muddies the water as to whether or not we can draw conclusions on the Zalanin and the Precursors. On paper, so to speak, it's never explicitly confirmed that the Harbinger is a precursor. However, the lore states that the Precursors could occupy many forms, ranging from dust and corporeal matter up to beings as large as the primordial, and that they would subject themselves to numerous cycles of birth, change, growth, development, decline, death, and rebirth. So, the very nature of the Precursors does support the concept that the Harbinger, and more broadly speaking the Zalanin, are a form of precursor, if not the Precursors themselves. But again, this has never been explicitly confirmed. In Halo, how effective are longswords at taking out Covenant fighters? Well, the longswords are immensely impressive vessels, but they have inferior firepower, inferior maneuvering, and inferior hull armor with no energy shields. The longswords can be outfitted with significantly more powerful payloads, but when this is employed, it is most definitely a one-time use scenario. More often than not, it's just a single high-yield thermonuclear device, and that's either deployed and then the craft extracts, or it's a kamikaze-style affair. Seraph fighters are much more agile, faster, have nanolaminate hull plating and energy shields, and possess heavy plasma cannons, fuel rod cannons, and air-to-ground plasma charges. In a one-to-one battle with equally skilled pilots, the Seraph has a clear edge. However, the Covenant aren't very adaptive in combat modus operandi, allowing skilled and experienced UNSC pilots to accurately predict their intentions and exploit them for the win. Why are there significantly less skulls in Halo 4 and Halo 5 compared to Halo 1, 2 and 3? Because Bungie put significantly more time and effort into Easter eggs and peripheral collectibles, achievements and objectives than 343 Industries has in their games. That really is the long and short. Could the Flood from Halo conquer the Dune universe? Yes. The Flood fights an inverse war of attrition. A loss of a combat unit in the Flood army results in more infectors, leading to more infected hosts, leading to replenishment of the ranks. The fall of an enemy not only reduces the enemy army by 1, but adds that 1 to the Flood army as the host is infected and converted into a Flood combat form. This ever-tipping set of scales very rapidly balances the fight in the favour of the Flood, in spite of how sophisticated, strategic or well experienced their enemy or opponent is. As the Flood fights, they infect and grow and learn. That's where their true power is. They learn the secrets of the hosts that they infect, which means that very rapidly over time the Flood learn all of the tactics and all of the strategies and all of the important information of their opponent, and thus learn how to destroy them from the inside out. The Foreigners fell to the Flood, and they were as close to godhood as is reasonable to expect. In the grand scheme of things, most universes would fall to the Flood. Would you like to see a Halo or Gears of War movie directed by Zack Snyder? Yes, for Gears of War. No for Halo, I think. I think his direction style and previous experience would really lend well to a Gears of War universe movie. Halo is a very different kind of story. The grand space opera of Halo would be better told by the likes of Ridley Scott, Peter Jackson, or even Steven Spielberg, in my humble opinion. Why do some players in Halo Infinite sit with the enemy's flag right at their own base and just sit there with it instead of capping it for a score? Well, sometimes it's to allow their teammates to score a few more kills to secure a Steak-tacular, or simply boost their performance stats to get more EXP at the close of the match. Sometimes it's because their own flag is away from the base, which prevents you from capturing until your flag is returned. Sometimes they just don't know their arse from their elbow. I think Dune should be in future Halo games as he survived Reach. Do you agree? Yes. Apart from the Ark, where else could you be safe from annihilation when the Halo rings activate? It is known that you will be safe within shield worlds. These are Dyson spheres, and in some cases micro Dyson spheres held within slipspace rifts constructed by the Foreigners as an alternative to the Halo array. These work to mitigate the effects of the halos. It is also confirmed that you can survive the effects of the halos within a cryptum. Cryptum is a large stasis pod type object that we see the Didact emerge from in Halo 4. These are again somewhat suspended in slipspace rifts and are directly connected to the domain. And despite the fact that the domain will fail due to the effects of the firing of the Halo array, you will still be safe from the effects within the cryptum. And the only other known way to avoid the effects of the Halo rings is to be outside of their range, which is 3 radii from galactic center. Basically, you need to be well outside of the Milky Way galaxy. For Halo Infinite, 343 Industries said, Assassinations is a tech thing, potentially a possibility in the future, but we'd have to overhaul the entire multiplayer character rig. What does this mean for Assassinations in Halo Infinite? Well, quite simply, they aren't going to happen anytime soon. The overhaul needed to the game system to implement them is so substantial that it would take a tremendous amount of time, energy and resources to get it implemented. And any significant changes to the multiplayer system, the multiplayer character rig, and the general functionality and physics of the multiplayer engine will result in unexpected, catastrophic failures that would need to be remedied. The amount of bug testing alone just to try to circumnavigate some of these issues, alongside the cost of actually implementing the changes in the first place, would be immensely costly for a feature which is otherwise just an aesthetic feature which doesn't actually add any substance to the game per se. Yes, there are potentially ways in which it could be monetized, but then there would just be complaints about monetizing what people have arguably seen as being an in-game mechanic beforehand. So as far as the trade-offs are concerned, it's probably just not worth 343's time, energy and resources, so don't expect this to be high on the agenda or for it to be released anytime soon. Is pre-war UNSC an accurate depiction of humanity's technological level 500 years in the future? If not, what would be the perfect timeline for Halo? And if yes, how so? I'm afraid this question simply cannot be answered. The issue really harkens back to the almost infinite level of complexities and chaos theory that would inevitably come into effect over the immense 500-year span of technological innovations. Consider that in 1912, the first powered flight took place by the Wright brothers. In 1970, just 58 years later, the Boeing 747 was released, a 4-jet turbine engine passenger plane that is so massive that the first powered flight could have taken place within its hull. Even more insanely, the year before the jumbo jet launched, we put 2 men on the surface of the moon. So we went from the first powered flight to the first man on the moon in 57 years. No one could have predicted that. And in the 70s, there were predictions on what life would be like in the year 2000. Flying cars, a robot in every home, a life of automation and unlimited free green energy. That just didn't happen. We're dealing with the difference of just 50 to 60 years in these examples, yet Halo takes place 500 years in the future. It's just too big of a period of time with too many variables at play that all play into the deterministic chaos of the whole thing. To borrow a phrase, the present determines the future, but the approximate present does not approximately determine the future. What is the effective range of mass drivers from Mass Effect? That's a different one. Assuming it doesn't hit anything, infinite. it will just continue through space completely and utterly unaffected. That being said, the whole idea is to fire and hit something. Based on the velocities, they could have a practical range, which is the range where a shot can be fired and a vessel is unlikely to be able to move out of the way in time, of a dozen kilometers or so. Beyond that, you're basically firing in the dark and ruining some poor bastard's tea party on the other side of the universe.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider smashing the like button and leave a comment below on what you'd like me to cover next. Big shout out to my patrons, Spartan10148, the Metarch of my installation, Falcon, Prophet Bear, Mikhail, Sophia, and Ashley, my dutiful monitors, Darian, Scarab, Spartan0137, Anthony, Ghost, Aaron, Chris, Jacob, Sean, Element Zero, Somatic, Jordan J3, Dan, Mr. Keys, Directal, Gunslinger, Jacob, Bandmill, Echo, Evermore, Officer Cat, and Personal Devil, my diligent sub-monitors, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, and my loyal enforcers. And all the other patrons who have jumped aboard to support the channel. It means more to me than I can accurately put into words. Another shout out to my Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members, Spartan137, Jacob, Schmitty, Talia, Fenrir and Born Stellar, and all the other YouTube members keeping my installation running on that glorious vacuum energy. Shout out to John for I don't fucking know. And if you want more of this kind of content, hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you don't miss any future videos, and consider jumping aboard yourself as a patron or YouTube member to keep the channel alive and kicking. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.